Fixed it! Hoy! Oh, I'm taking these off. You're going to have to forgive my dishevelled appearance. I've just finished a shift and it took longer to do than I thought it would. Because this is something I've wanted to do for a while, and that was actually film in the pub, basically. So I thought, but you know, I shouldn't really say that because God knows what sequence these will go out in. I might decide to do something else. But this is one of the things that I wanted to film anyway. This is something a little bit unusual, and I want to talk about it. Straight off the bat, this is not something that is readily available to buy. So, God, it is warm in here. So, if this is something that, tickles your fancy, then we're in that territory again where sozzles. But for those of you who might be old enough to remember this, and I actually am, no, I am, but I certainly wasn't a drinker, certainly not a drinker of whiskey, not a drinker of anything, actually, when this was available. So I don't know the full tale of this. However, my own personal tale comes from a couple of months ago now. Both the owner and one of our regulars were talking about the Glenfiddich 21. And they were talking about it like it was the best thing on the planet. And I couldn't understand that because Glenfiddich 21, it's fine, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but it's hardly a write home on a postcard kind of a whiskey, and I think anyone who's tried that will understand that. And they kept saying that it was matured in Cuban rum casks. And I, being the supposed know-it-all that I think that I am, kept being like, no, it's Caribbean rum casks. And they didn't correct me. They just kind of gave me this sort of knowing look amongst themselves and moved on. So when I was browsing the auction sites maybe a couple of weeks later, blow me when this actually came up, and I was like, oh, I see, right, it did indeed used to be Cuban rum casks. So this is the 21-year-old Glenfiddich before the modern iteration, is my understanding. There might have been another, my understanding is this is the one between the Cuban rum cask that was very upfront about it. This is the Gran Reserva. And basically, my understanding is this iteration was to try to hide a little bit that it was a Cuban rum cask and still kind of like dive under the radar, but it didn't work. And my understanding is that this product was basically ultimately culled because the American market were like, you can't sell Cuban anything, even if it says Cuban rum matured, you can't do that. Which seems to be a shame because it appears to live up to the hype that I was hearing from the owner and one of our regulars. This certainly smells amazing. So I thought, well, the bottle's nearly done, by the way. Can't think of many 21-year-old whiskies that I could sell that fast, to be honest. Normally they're a bit of a struggle because obviously you pay a bit more for them, and indeed this wasn't exactly the cheapest bottle to buy by the nip over the bar. Hasn't stopped people though, and I think part of that being that it's a Glenfiddich back when they maybe put in a bit more effort, to be blunt. We're going to find out because this is my first kind of go with it. I am not going to be sticking any water in this or anything like that for two reasons. One, I forgot to get water before I hit record, and I don't want to get up and have to redo all the focus and stuff because everything's kind of precariously positioned. And two, hopefully it doesn't need it. It's a 43% liquid. I am a fan of the old Glenfiddich branding. It's got a bit more kind of class to it. Also, I've got to be wary of the focus on this because it's a manual focus lens, and if you move like a nanometer, everything's out of focus. This could all be out of focus now. I really need to get an autofocus and just stop being a hipster and make my life easier. So it says Exquisitos. I'm so sorry. Gran Reserva Cuban Rum Finish. And the Cuban Rum Finish is a very small typeface. I mean, to be fair, it's not the most subtle writing on here. 43% alcohol by volume is actually in a colour that is extremely similar to the background, and you do really have to squint. And it's a 750ml bottle. Oh, I didn't realise that. Exciting. Glenfiddich 21-year-old Gran Reserva single malt Scotch whisky. What's the name? Completed its maturation in our Cuban rum finish casks. Rum distillers from, this font's actually quite hard to read, Sancti Spiritus in the heart of Cuba were instrumental in its creation. Now there's something you don't get on modern Glenfiddichs. Where the provenance of anything. That's quite extraordinary to see, actually. The result is a 21-year-old Glenfiddich that is vibrant, long, and rich. I've had boyfriends like that. With an initial toffee sweetness, spice notes, and hints of sweet tobacco and leather. I've had boyfriends like that as well. This is a modern 21 cork on here, just before anyone kicks off and goes, "Oh, that's not the same cork." Auction bottles, the corks disintegrate on them. So luckily, we didn't have to tea strain at any of this. The cork, we got it out. It just came out in 2 pieces as opposed to 1. So we needed a replacement, and the modern cork does fine. Hopefully, we haven't sullied it with the new product's Caribbean-ness. Let's go with that. So this is what I've got in the glass, and due to the fact that it's taken me about 30 minutes to settle this up and try to get lighting sorted out, for which I'm using an off-screen candle, I wish I was kidding. This is really filming in the bloody Renaissance. This has had about 30 minutes in the glass. I'm very much looking forward to seeing sort of what this is like. Now, obviously, again, I don't need to go into too many details. This is kind of for me, to be honest. And you can just deal with that. So, yeah. Nose on this is unlike any Glenfiddich I've ever had the pleasure or the not pleasure to try. Nose. I mean, my modern torchbearer for the Glenfiddich Rangers, if there was one, would be the firing cane. I mean, it's not exactly, that's my extractor firing up, it does that and I can't switch it off, so just pretend that massive sort of hoovering noise is not happening right now. The nose on this is vibrant, it's like a firework going off. It's gingery, it's molasses, there's a little bit of coconut. There's no mucking around, but there has been rum near this, and quite a bit of it. It really left a signature on the spirit. This is not a glancing blow kind of a finish. This is a proper, it's inherited something from the rum. There's a lot of finishes now which you couldn't even necessarily do. I've had some Sauterne finishes and stuff, and I'm like, Sauterne is not a subtle liquid. Where the fuck is it? Kind of a thing. I mean, I don't want my Sauterne finisher to be cloyingly sweet, but at the same time, some kind of indication that it was there at some point would be nice. There are other finishes as well where it's it hasn't really made much of a difference. If anything, it's just been there to kind of round off the sharp corners rather than anything else. But this is a marriage of the two. This is very much rum and Speyside whiskey, and it does still have the sort of classic notes which Glenfiddich is known for, with apples and pears, and it's a little bit biscuity and a little bit malty. But it just feels like the backbone of it is just a higher quality spirit overall. Now, obviously, you're looking chill filtered coloured 43%. So far, this is a very good indication of what you can do with that. Would it have been incredible to see it at a better presentation? Absolutely. I can only assume that back in 2007, 2009, which I think is when this was, there are going to be people from that time correcting me. And if you are one of those people, tell me your memories of this. Tell me what you remember seeing it on the shelves for. How much did it go for? Did you try it with friends? If you're going to pull me up on something that I couldn't possibly know beyond sort of secondary research, let's make it a story. Let's make it a conversation as well. Tell us a bit about this, because this bottle's fascinated me about the recent history of whiskey. Because we like to think that we live in the golden age of whiskey, and to be fair, we do. But for a core, pretty well known, like extremely well known, market leader whiskey to be knocking something out that is really fantastic quality so far, and that's just based off of the notes. Like, you know how sometimes you get a sense for something and you're just like, yes, that is excellent? I'm getting on this. It's becoming a little more sort of Demerara sugar. It's got kind of a flapjacky, oaty, golden syrup sweetness coming through. Really digging the smell, and I'm going to fire in. I'm just going to drink it. That's incredible. I never thought I'd catch myself saying this about a Glenfiddich. That's fucking incredible. It's so... There's so much ginger coming up, but it's almost like a ginger nut biscuit. It's sweet, but it's fiery. It's a little bit of a chili kick. It's a little bit fruity. It's a little bit mellow. But one thing it absolutely is not is lacking in flavour. That's extraordinary. Really, that's genuinely extraordinary. There's a beautiful heat to this. There's an element of kind of like lemongrass, sort of like herbal citrus component, but it's just fire. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's all-encompassing warmth. Ginger is just the star player in this. It reminds me a little of Jamaica cake. It's got that kind of molasses, sweet, treacly, spice ginger heat. There's a very mild sort of red chili kick to it. It's a little peppery. And then at the back, the underlying Glenfiddich comes through, so there's a little bit of a conference pear note to it. It's a little biscuity. It's absolutely incredible. As you drink it, and incidentally, this is eminently drinkable. It doesn't need anything to it. It really doesn't. It's quaffable as a whiskey. You want to go back for more, which, I mean, suddenly the level on this bottle makes sense. It's delightful. It's a whiskey that you absolutely can crack out for a special occasion, and nobody would have any issue being like, oh yeah, that's a fucking cracking whiskey. I don't have any information about how much this cost at the time. I spent $210 at auction for this, which, from what I can tell, was an extremely good price for this. I mean, yeah. Thank you, economic downturn, I suppose. I just noticed as well on the label, there's a couple of ribbons on either side, and it says rich aged. It's not often I agree with that kind of flannel, but you know what? It kind of summarises this. It is rich, and, well, it's a whiskey, so yes, it has been aged, so I suppose I can agree with both of those statements, however much it gets me to do so. Also interesting to note, it's kind of one of those greeny brown bottles. It's a very unusual colour. Obviously, modern 21-year-old has a much bigger, fatter, and more heavily designed bottle, and is clear, which, nothing against that, you know, it's not beer at the end of the day, it's not like Coronas or something like that. I'm still getting used to abandoning every other form of liquor on this channel. It's going to take me a minute. Closing thoughts on this one. I'm sad they don't make it anymore. That last sip, it's kind of moving over to other biscuits. There's a little bit of a hobnob sweet. I feel like I'm repeating myself quite a bit, with sort of a golden syrup oatiness to it. The fire is mellowing out, but that might be because I've had 3 or 4 sips of it and I'm acclimatizing to it. But it's a treat every time you go into it. It's an absolute dear. I love the packaging. The tin on it actually is very lovely. It's on the fireplace over in the other room, so I can't show it to you, but the tin actually is actually quite lovely. It's got these accents of red on it, which the bottle does as well, but it's much more kind of forward. Am I getting the leather? I've never really been into that scene, so I don't have a lot of experience with that. And likewise with tobacco as well. I'm too vanilla for this whiskey, I think. But hey, I'm glad that it shared its kinks with me because, do you know what? It's fun to dip the toes sometimes. Where am I going with this? What the fuck am I on about?